on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
There's a lot of really sad, shitty stories out there right now, and we still get to live beyond our wildest dreams.
Rural was considered kind of like rednecks out there, and then in the cities where it's all happening and we've got all this culture, and then now it's like, oh, you privileged people out in the country.
How do we put forth the stories of old and make it not just about nostalgia, but about how the stories of then are continuing to grow us into the future?
By eating a lot of those cultural foods, I feel connected to the place. So I imagine that for a lot of the people who've come to work with you, it's a nice immersion, because like you said, you go to a new place, it can be hard to have those real, deep, legitimate experiences of a place. Your
family and the people who are close to you, the stories of these people, how it all came to be. Like, man, if that don't sit close on your heart, then I don't know, you gotta take a long walk in the woods.
Episode 80 of the WildFed podcast, The Case for Rural Living with Lori McCarthy, is brought to you by Surthrival. I've always believed in the idea of self-healthcare. In other words, taking personal responsibility for our own health where we can. While modern medicine plays an extremely important role in our lives, we often overemphasize it at the expense of our own personal responsibility. That's why I believe in getting great nutrition, regular, vigorous exercise, proper sunlight exposure, fresh air, and of course, good quality supplementation. It's also why I created Surthrival.com, a supplement brand focused on the nutritional and health challenges of the modern era. Right now until May 28th, all CBD and elk antler products at Surthrival.com are 20% off with the coupon code ROBUST20. That's the word robust and the numbers 20. Elk antler is nature's most steroidal compound, rich in growth factors, collagen, and a suite of other substances that tune your metabolism and supercharge your recovery. Surthrival CBD3 is best in class, made with 2 heavily researched CBD nutraceuticals and an organic full-spectrum hemp extract. Go to Surthrival.com and use the coupon code ROBUST20 for 20% off all CBD and elk antler formulas. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Hunter's Journey online mentorship program. Whether you're wondering if becoming a hunter is right for you, you're ready to start a hunting journey of your own, or you're a beginner hunter working towards your first harvest, hunting can be daunting. Where do you start? What gear and knowledge do you need? What do you do when your strategy's not working? And most importantly, how do you hunt ethically and sustainably? An ancient and essential part of the hunter's journey is having a mentor to pass on their decades of experience and guide you along your own journey. Chris Gilmore, our guest from episode 58 on tracking and awareness, has created a comprehensive online hunter mentorship program called The Hunter's Journey. If you're ready to start or improve your hunting, check out thehuntersjourney.com. There's an early bird special running till summer, and all WildFed listeners get an additional $100 off with the coupon code WildFed100. Head over to thehuntersjourney.com and enter WildFed100 to learn to hunt with skill, respect, and heart. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. It's always great catching up with friends and colleagues, especially when that friend is our returning guest, Lori McCarthy of Newfoundland, Canada. Lori's one of Canada's most celebrated wild food enthusiasts, the creator of Cod Sounds, a culinary excursion company, the author of the upcoming book Food, Culture, Place, and the host of a new television series called the East Coast Forager. I visited Lori in 2019 to film an upcoming episode of the WildFed TV show, so stay tuned for that. And Lori and I developed a great rapport based on our mutual fascination with all things wild food and place-based eating. It's not every day you get to enjoy the Newfoundland dialect, so sit back, relax, and enjoy an accent you rarely get to hear, unless of course you visit the island yourself, or what the locals call the Rock. Lori McCarthy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
So good. Always awesome to have you on here. You're a fan favorite.
Nice.
Oh, man. I just read a novel that took place up there in Newfoundland.
No. All the one time now. Come on. Right?
Newfoundland, not Newfoundland.
No, not in Like, Daniel, I thought we were past this, man.
Oh, I'm just testing you. I'm just making sure you're consistent. But it took place on Fogo Island. It was like a thriller about polar bears coming down on the ice pack, and all took place right around that inn you're always telling me about. So it's kind of cool because it was all geographically accurate. So as I was reading the book, I was like on Google Earth, like looking at the streets they're describing in the different places, and yeah, it was a fun read.
Fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, they are, I mean, somewhat common in certain parts of the island, mostly more north, like up around St. Anthony and stuff, right? Up in the Great Northern Peninsula. It's more common. Like, I've never seen them down this end, but yeah, lots of stories out there.
I didn't realize that when I was up there. And then the other thing is I remember when I was there, there was still some of like the ice was still for sale. I didn't really, and you guys were telling me, okay, that's the winter ice coming. I didn't understand really like how this whole thing worked with how, because the northern part of Newfoundland gets actually iced in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we have the ferry that goes from the northern tip of Newfoundland over to Labrador, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they get serious pack ice up there. I mean, it's not rare for us to get pack ice, but we don't get it every year because it would kind of have to come down on the eastern side of Newfoundland and then get the right wind to get it blown right into shore.
Right.
So there's lots of years we don't get ice, packed right in. But when we do, it's quite a spectacle to see, and of course causes havocs with all the local ferries, right? Because there's still a ton of local ferries that go all around the island, and there's still places that can only be accessed by ferries.
Yeah, it's neat to me just that you have this phenomenon taking place there that most of the world doesn't really have any kind of conception of. Like ice isn't a thing that we deal with. I don't know, maybe it's like people, I sometimes will realize like, oh, there's people around the world who must find our worldwide Christmas holiday based on our temperate region and our snowfall like annoying because they don't have snow or, evergreen trees or whatever, but every year it comes around. It's kind of like that. It's like, you guys just live with it. I'm sure you're used to it. The rest of the world has like no idea that, I don't know what.
Yeah, it's funny because,
right?
Well, it's funny you mentioned it because I didn't really think of it in terms of, wow, I wonder what the rest of the world thinks about all this ice. But, it's not like we're a very popular place. Sometimes I think, when I talk to people about it, I'm from Newfoundland, and then I realize, wait a minute, I have to actually say I'm from Canada, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not. Yeah, it's not, if it's someone said you're from Hawaii, well, like, I feel like everyone knows Hawaii and the Galapagos Islands or something, right? But from Newfoundland, and sometimes you see that look come over people's face and like, oh, it's in Canada. Right?
Once you kind of know about it, though, it's such a unique and cool place, and it's got such a unique, cool history, and people who do know about it all seem to like really love it. Anytime I meet somebody who's been there, it's like, they really, really love the place and are so fond of it. I don't know. It's kind of a cool undiscovered thing from when you're outside of Canada,
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of people that come here and, spend summers here or spend a significant amount of time here that they have summer homes here. And for those people, they're dying to be from Newfoundland, right? They wish they were from here. So I always say, it's like, no. I mean, you're coming here for 12 years now. Sure, you're basically a Newfoundlander now. We'll let you in.
Oh, that's nice because they don't do that here, man. I was born in New Hampshire and I've been in Maine since I was 15 years old. But I'm in my 40s now. But somebody asks like, "Where are you from?" And you go, "Well, I'm actually originally from New Hampshire." And it's like, "Oh, you're not. You're not a Mainer. You can never be unless you're born here." And I just deal with that discrimination all the time, whatever. But
you've just accepted it. It's okay.
I just accepted it. Wow, you've got a lot going on. Catch us up a little bit from the last time you've been on the show, because I see that you're working on TV, you're working on a book. It looks like you've been working with some other high-profile influencers in the hunting world. You've been busy.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like we're all dealing with what's going on in the world in terms of COVID and stuff. But I got to say, like, this time for me, and of course nobody wants it, like, you kind of feel like you're not supposed to say that. Jesus, I'm having a great time.
Best time of my life.
Right? But so many things have just changed. And, people say like life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like, I have just been so blessed during this time for a lot of things. Like, yeah, I mean, like lots of people, we've realized how awesome it is to spend more time with our families and all that stuff, and giving me time to look at the business, look at, where it's come from and where it is now. And I didn't adopt the mindset because, my business is, a lot of it is known for in the tourism world, right? And a lot of the publicity and the magazines and stuff it's all tourism based. But I guess
for listeners who don't know you, you're talking about your Cod Sounds business, which was
right. Sorry.
Explain that a little bit so people know kind of where you're coming from, and then we can talk about where you're headed.
Yeah, so Cod Sounds started about 10 years ago, and it started as a company to take travelers out onto the land, out into the woods, and expose them and introduce them to, wild game, the wild foods that grow here. And not in, I guess in a bit of a mix of a way, right? I always tell people it's truly about a little bit of the old and a little bit of new, kind of the food story of Newfoundland from the past to the present and to the future of it. So, we're out, we forage, whether it's picking berries or, picking wild edibles of any kind. And then I light a fire and I'll do, 4, 5, 6 courses of food, and only food that comes from here, right? And especially when it comes to proteins, lots of seafood, wild game, and whatever we kind of get up to picking that day. And it's really an opportunity to share with people, like I said, not just the food of the time, but it as it is and how it relates to our culture, sort of how we came to be and all that. So it's, you're sitting around the fire and telling stories for hours. So it's always been, dear to my heart to kind of share with people these stories, because sometimes, when you travel to a place, it's hard to get into the nuts and bolts of it, we'll say, right? And so when I take people out, there's only 6 or 8 people at a time. And it's really a chance to do what you and I are doing, right? Sit back, have a chat, and answer those questions that people are sometimes, especially when it comes to our food, people are sometimes hesitant to ask about, right? I mean, there's lots of cultures, there's lots of shame around the food and the poverty food of a place and things like seal and there's lots of questions that people are just afraid to ask. So it's really nice to get everyone in a comfortable situation where we bring up that stuff, right? Bring up the hunting culture, bring up, the fishery and again, some of that stuff that's not so commonly eaten in places, we'll say, So that's what the company is. Yeah.
I found when I was there, I mean, we didn't get too far out of St. John's, but by the way, did you see, what's the comedian's name Jim Gaffigan? Did you see his latest stuff he did a piece in Canada? Did you see that?
No, I didn't. I'll look it up.
Man. There's some pretty good stuff because he gets on St. John's and St. John a little bit. It's pretty funny. But anyway, I didn't get, to travel around the island too much. I mean, we were kind of localized, around St. John's, but I felt like I got to, going out cod fishing, going out for scallops, going out to those barrens and harvesting stuff and bringing it back. And, I remember I have some key memories of, like fly fishing and you coming up from the fire with all the steaks of back strips of moose, it's pretty awesome. Or getting to eat seal, that morning before we flew out, all that kind of stuff. So even though I feel like I don't have a deep sense of what it's all about there, I got to, by eating a lot of those cultural foods, I feel like I kind of get more of a sense of it than a lot of people who travel there. You know what I mean? Like I feel connected to the place through the food. So I imagine that for a lot of the people who've come to work with you, it's a nice immersion. Cause like you said, you go to a new place, it can be hard to have those real deep, legitimate experiences of a place.
Yeah. For, a lot of the food that I serve, it's not like something you can go to a restaurant and get. Sometimes it's only stuff that you can get in people's homes, right? And so it gives me an opportunity to share with people foods that are you can't come here and get on your own, right? So that's really interesting. When you talk about we didn't leave really the city almost in a certain way, meaning that we were an hour or so outside, but this is a city of 120,000 to 150,000 people. So it's like a town,
big,
right?
Big town. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big town. And I live in the heart of the city really. And 5 minutes from my house, I can be in the woods and it feels like I am in the middle of nowhere. And I can forage there. I can hunt inside 5 minutes. I can hunt snipe and catch German brown. And, so I never wasn't really that, in front of my mind until I went to places when I went to big cities. You go to Montreal or go to New York somewhere, and it's people who have these, hobbies and these passions. They're driving 2 and 3 hours outside the city to get to a place where they can do that. And we don't have to do that here. So I guess it's a sense that we're just so close to these natural resources that we have that they're just so easily accessible, right? So it's not like a big treat to wait. You don't have to wait until a long weekend to go off doing this kind of stuff, which is a privilege really, right? I think of it as anyway.
It's funny because it wasn't considered a privilege. It wasn't that long ago that being in the country was kind of looked down on, and going to the city was what you did if you really wanted to be somebody, you really wanted to make it. And then with what we're experiencing right now, it's like this 180 all of a sudden. And I was wondering if you're experiencing one of the things we are, which is that up here in Maine, we have a tremendous influx because just south of us, of course, we got Boston, not too far from there, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It's a lot of money, really urban cultures. And people who have made a lot of money and now can work remotely are like, well, I'm going to go to Maine and buy some land or buy a home, build a home. So huge influx up here. Are you guys getting anything like that from Canada?
Yeah, like I just heard of statistics out of Canada. The real estate industry for rural living is up like 28% or something in Canada. And we're also getting that. And they're not so much leaving from other places, but they're leaving the hub cities in Canada and moving rural because they realize that they can now, right? Yeah. And I think it's going to be I think that this, working from home, big companies are going to realize that they are not going to need, they're no longer going to need these massive offices that they need. And it's going to be cheaper for them to keep their employees remote, especially the ones who are happy enough to do it.
Yeah.
So, it's a real shift. I mean, you can come to Newfoundland still. And I was looking at cabins the other day. Some hunting shacks here, Daniel.
Believe me, I think about it. I think about it a lot.
I know, it's so funny. I'm only, like 2 hours from, say, really good, like upland bird ground, right? Yeah. And yesterday a friend of mine and I were looking at it like, geez, man, we should get a cabin down Trepassey area, right? Which is only an hour and a half from here. And I'm like, geez, we can pick one up for like $15,000.
Stop it. It hurts my ears. But, we can't get up to Canada. So my wife hasn't been home since before the pandemic started. So she's not seen her mom or seen her brother. And, Justin Trudeau, got it pretty strict up there, right? Like in Montreal, they're on an 8 p.m. curfew. Her brother right? Like grown-ups, you can't go up past 8 p.m. Her brother was just telling me that you can be outside if you're walking a dog. So I said, well, I wonder if people have like fake dogs on stiff leashes that they're walking around. He's like, oh yeah, people are getting busted all the time. He's like, a woman got busted the other day walking her husband on a leash. She's like,
oh Jesus,
But we haven't been able to cross over actually, and so I'm really looking for this year, especially. I'm really eager to start doing more stuff in Canada. I think this one of the effects of all of this for me has been a desire to spend more time in the north, just kind of get away from all the people, but it's like I can't go too far north outside of Maine now.
Yeah, we're all falling into that. Even for me, it's the more time I spend outside the city, I don't know. Again, especially since all this came in, right? There's just there's a sense of freedom, right? And I don't know what it's like to live in these big cities, and even a city like St. John's. I can't wait to get out to the cabin on the weekend. I don't get out there as much as I want, but I can leave the house and be out to the cabin and go out there just for lunch it's only 40 minutes outside the city, right? And it's a mindset, right? And I think that's a lot of what, drives people and to want to go out, right? Get out in rural, like you said, to go more north. There's something about that remote connection to a place that detaches us from what seems to be this busy headspace that we drive back into when we go into the city. Like I remember saying to my cousin,
putting it mildly,
right? Well, I remember saying to my cousin, like we're out at the cabin and I'm like, how do we just take a little bit of this home with us every day? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you, and that's the balance of life, right? How do you function in your everyday inside your job, your city, your life, yet and bring a little bit of that headspace with you, right? Because the change of physical headspace, I don't know. It's when you're when you're in these places and you're, north and you're more remote and you're out in the bush and it's like, oh my God, I don't know. It's hard to describe, isn't it, when you get out there?
Yeah, but there's also the how do you shorten the time it takes to get into that headspace too when you get out there, right? Because I'll notice we go up north into the north woods of Maine to do some fishing in the winter, and we get to a place where there's no phone service, and when we get up, which is there used to be a lot of that, but now the coverage just seems like it's everywhere, so it's less and less. But we get up there, and it's interesting because I'll be down here, and it'd be like, yeah, I get does your phone. My phone does things I don't ask it to do, like tell me how much screen time I've had this week or whatever. It'll be like, your screen time's up 12%. Anyway, I'll be like, sometimes feel like I can't put my phone down, because I work from home and I got teams that are, I don't know when people are going to be contacting me. I'm managing social media, all this stuff. Right. Anyway, I get out to where there's no phone service. It's amazing. It's like 20 minutes into it, I forget about my phone. I don't even want to see it. I don't even want to take it out to take pictures half the time. I'm like,
I know,
and it's actually pretty easy to detach from that. But to get to the place where your head quiets down enough that you're starting to really see nature and be part of it, that, I'd like to find a way to lessen that amount of time too,
Me too, because if you go out to the cabin for the weekend, you got 48 hours, right? Yeah. And it's at the decompression time. If you can shorten the decompression time, it's like they talk about shortening your reaction time to things, right?
Right.
You just shorten the decompression time.
Yeah.
So you can. I guess it's just skill, Daniel. I don't think we've mastered that.
We haven't mastered
meditation of skill.
We haven't mastered. Well, I want to say something. I want to get in a minute here to some of the stuff you're doing now, but I wanted to say that it's interesting for people who have been living this lifestyle or even interested in it, the lifestyle you and I are always talking about and stuff that we're into. Once all this began, it was like we were so well positioned. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's made it that everybody I know who's into any aspect of a rural lifestyle or a foraging lifestyle or hunting lifestyle or even just like a burning wood fires lifestyle or whatever, anybody who does any of those things, like suddenly their lifestyle is so validated. And now everybody's like, I really get why you've been into that all these years now. It's really starting to make sense. And it's like, it's neat to have. I mean, I feel bad because there's so many people who are suffering through this, but it seems like all my friends, wherever they are, when I talk to them, they're like, actually, I got to be honest, I'm doing better than ever right now. Because
that's the thing. Yeah. I too have heard that, right?
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, you're like, I kind of feel bad saying it, but yeah, I mean, this is actually, it's not just adding, it's like validating, but it adds like this legitimacy in my own mind too. Like the things that I'm doing seem even more important to me now than they did before. Less hobby and more real to me.
And that's fair to say. And that's, I actually like the way you put that. Like it's less hobby and it's not like, bug out bag kind of situation either, right? It's somewhere in between, right? I don't have a shelter somewhere that's, packed with stuff I need to go to. But it's interesting how you put it, like the validation of it, because when people come to you and they're like, I can't get to the grocery store, or the grocery store is out of all this stuff. And I'm like, and then you realize, I guess it's more the gratitude part of it, of how much meat people like you and I actually have in the freezer.
It's crazy. Right?
It's crazy. Right. And then you hear, and it's like you say, there's a lot of really sad, shitty stories out there right now. Right. And we still get to live like beyond our wildest dreams in terms of our food consumption, in terms of our lifestyle, just because we are rural. So it's hard. It's hard to feel like it's okay to say that, geez, man, things are great. I think humans have a problem with that. It's hard to say that everything's great when we know that people don't have it like this at this time, right? I've been doing a lot of online teaching and stuff, right? And so when it becomes these more intimate situations and these realities than you really thought it would be. But I mean, you're in people's homes. You feel like you're in their home. You're conversing with them. They have been in their apartment building I had a couple a little while ago for like a year. She says, we basically haven't left our apartment in a year. And I'm like, holy shit, right? I can't, I can't even wrap my head around that,
Can you imagine?
So, no.
You'd be like a caged animal, like
right.
when
And
you're used to the level of freedom that you have and the level of movement that you have options for. I mean, it's just hard for me to picture.
It is, because like even here, when our government said, all right, people, we don't want you to go to your cabins. And we're like, what? Right. And so, and it's about, and it became a bit of a thing, right? Because when our cases were a little bit high, now, we're like 1-2 cases a day here in Newfoundland. We got nothing to talk about like that. Right.
Right.
But they're like, yeah, because what's happening is that there is this created this friction between the people who are living in the cities, and their cabins are out rural. And then the highest cases were in the cities when it was high. And then so people are then going out to their cabins. And when they're out to the cabins, they're going to the grocery stores and the gas stations. And so it created this weird chit chat around that, and immediately you feel like, wait a minute, like, like someone has the power to take that away from you, that freedom.
Right.
And even in a small way, I have that moment. It's like, wow, someone actually has that power to take away that freedom. And I guess it just reminds us all the time of like how damn lucky we are. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, it's those moments of absolute gratitude, right? And that's all you can do, right? It's just moments of absolute gratitude for the way that we get to live, like,
But so, Newfoundland, you guys are more independent, I think, independently spirited than a lot of mainland Canada.
You mean anarchists.
Well, you know what I mean? Because, in the States, we have such a strong, we're losing it really fast, of course. I'm sure you're seeing it, but especially in the rural areas, we're not really enjoying being told what to do. I mean, even if it's the right advice, we don't like being forced to comply to things. And that's kind of the spirit of the United States. That's sort of how we, kick the Brits out or whatever, all those years ago. And, but you go into Canada, it's Canada, the joke always, down in the States is like, sorry. Canadians
right.
kind of seen as being a lot more docile and socialized than Americans. But then when I was up there, I was like, I recognize there's like a rebel spirit up where you are that
there's
I imagine.
It might be a bit of an internal uprising.
Yeah, totally. I also want to comment on something you brought up before, because it's also interesting. I mean, I guess it's how we define it, but you get this word privilege gets used so much now. And it can be a little confusing because, 2 years ago, it was a privilege to live in LA. I mean,
right.
Or to live in New York. I mean, to pay $6,000 a month for a, 1,000 square foot apartment, less 800 square foot apartment, you're paying thousands of dollars. Right. Where here it would be $750. You know what I mean?
Here too.
Yeah. So people, rural was considered kind of like I was saying before, like, like you rednecks out there or whatever. And then in the cities where it's all happening and we've got all this culture and we've got all this art, and we've got all this music and all these restaurants and chefs and blah, 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 blah. And Ubers. Ooh. And then now it's like, you privileged people out in the country. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? 2 years ago, you guys were making fun of us. Now we're the ones with the privilege. I mean, that's pretty interesting to watch how that shift has happened. But at the same time, I get it. I mean, to have land and to have space. But at the same time, it's not like I just woke up one day here. I mean, I had to position myself over the course of decades to have this lifestyle too.
It's intentional, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely intentional, right? Like this is the lifestyle you wanted, and you carved it out. Yeah. And if you live in a city, like you say, it's that, I think it's that mindset, if you want to be something, make something of yourself, well, you have to move to the big city. If you're an actor or chasing TV or whatever, then you have to go and live in LA. And, but it depends on what you're chasing, man. Sometimes we're chasing what you think you want, and then you end up what you actually need.
yeah, exactly. But it's interesting here. You and I are both really rural for the countries we live in. I mean, both kind of in the farthest Donland part of the countries we're in, and both of us getting involved in TV, which is kind of neat. So anyway, I guess segueing, tell me about what you have going on and the projects you're working on right now. We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, have you ever thought about your light diet? We talk about the food we eat and the water we drink, but what about the light we consume each day and especially at night? It's important because our light diet, or the light we consume through our eyes, is like a kind of electromagnetic nutrition, and it influences our circadian rhythm and hormone production. Our bodies need that crisp blue light of the early day to set our internal clock. That's why it's so good to head outside first thing in the morning to jumpstart your day. But our computers, tablets, phones, home lighting, and vehicle headlight LEDs also use blue light that tricks our bodies into thinking that night is day, upsetting our melatonin production, disrupting our sleep, and even impacting our all-important mitochondrial function. That's where Raw Optics come in. Raw Optics produces the finest blue light blocking glasses to filter out the unhealthy, or rather untimely, light from our devices, helping to optimize your light diet and restore your circadian rhythm. They use melanin pigment infused lenses with German steel and Italian acetate frames. They're streamlined and stylish, and they have daytime and nighttime designs. If you work on a computer, spend a lot of time on your phone, or drive at night when blue LED headlights are shining into your eyes, you need to check out Raw Optics. Go to rawoptics.com/wildfed. That's raoptics.com/wildfed for 15% off your order. Again, it's spelled RA Optics, and you'll get 15% off by going to rawoptics.com/wildfed. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, so we just picked up a show with Bell TV. So we're going to run a 6-series show called the East Coast Forager. So that'll be national distribution.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's good. It's fun. Yeah, and so
who's the talent in it?
Yeah, that will be me.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you were
right? So I was like literally sitting down with papers now, crafting out what I want this to look like, and what it's gonna, how it's gonna be done. And I'm, pulling all this stuff that I've already been in and trying to put together for the, what my vision is for the creative team and how we want it to come across on the other end. And so that's kind of where we are now. We're supposed to start shooting on Monday, weather holding. Wow. We've only seen the sun one day in the last 14. And so we're going to head out to the cabin. Actually, I got, finally got a trapper's tent put up out just outside the cabin.
That's that wall tent I saw on your Instagram.
Yeah. So that's really fun. So we're going to, that's, to help with weather and stuff. So we got the trapper's tent put up there, and that's part of my, I don't know, I call it my connection to my grandfather. And you remember when you were here and I had the fox pelts on the wall. Mm-hmm. And And so I lost my grandfather when I was 4, I think I was. Yeah. And so now that we're writing this book, we're going through all these old pictures, and there's all these old pictures. And my grandfather was a Newfoundland Ranger. And
what does that mean?
So at his time, he was kind of like the law for the community. Yep. So actually, you'd enjoy that book. I should send you that book about the life of the Newfoundland Rangers here. And they went out into the communities, and they were, what, say, the RCMP would be today, right? In Canada. For
a people outside of Canada, that's the Royal Mounted Police, right?
Yeah, the Royal Mounted Constabulary.
Who aren't how I always picture like a cartoon version in the red shirt with the black sash on a horse, but obviously they're a little more modernized than that now.
Well, all that still goes on, actually. Yeah, they're still in the okay. But so that's the rural police, say, right? So before there was them, there was the Newfoundland Rangers here. And so my grandfather was stationed in little tiny communities for long periods of time. And they were in, trappers' huts as such. And they built, they had log huts built, for lack of a better term, because you can't really call them houses. And they were pretty much self-sustaining. So I have all these gorgeous pictures of him with rabbits and trout, and there was no moose here at the time. But anyway, so he was the real, fisherman, trapper, and all that. And I always say that all this is my nostalgia. We're trying to reconnect with him.
Yeah,
so,
you're owed to him. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's some of these skills that he had, are are being lost, and I really didn't get to know him at all. So this is my journey, sort of, learn a little bit about the kind of stuff he got up to. Anyway, so we got the, go ahead.
How did you, one of the things that I heard when I got into television was right off the bat, we were told, listen, the foraging shows have been pitched so much that if you even say the word foraging to any network executives, they're closing the door immediately. They just don't want to, they just, it doesn't work on TV. They don't want to hear it. And then somehow we slipped through with it, So I'm curious, your show has actually got the word forager in the name. How'd the show come about?
I was approached by a local production company, actually, who spoke to me about it and said, look, we know you and we know what the networks are looking for right now. Would you consider putting in a pitch? And,
that's awesome.
It's really interesting. Like, you hear all this stuff about, I'm not much one for, writing down these goals in life. And I never really was, but I guess it was 8 or 10 years ago, I actually wrote out, how cool it would be to have a show as with all this, telling these stories that didn't get told. Right. And here we are putting it together today. So it's very nice to see it come together, but it's more about, it's the storytelling, right? And it's the stuff like that you and I do, that it's more, it's not about going out, learn this plant, put this plant in some culinary fascination world, right? It's, we're telling the stories of place, culture, food. And that's actually the name of the book, right? The name of the book is Food, Culture, Place. And it's,
you changed your Instagram handle too.
I did. Yeah. So it's more about the storytelling of the place, of the culture. So yes, it has the word forager in it. This network has never done really anything like that. So to them, it was kind of, new, while I guess in the mainstream, it's been, the mainstream has been done so much, right? And so many pitches are put to it. It wouldn't have been my choice for title. But hey, right? You take what you can get. You go with it.
Oh, it's pretty cool, though. Yeah, I mean, they are branding you the East Coast Forager. That's kind of a big honor, actually, right? It's pretty cool.
It'll be fun to do. It'll be fun to to share the stories like I've shared with you about here and the food and for so much of it is about, for me, it's about like how much can we push this? Like how do we take these amazing resources that we have, take care of them, bring awareness to them, and how do we keep them on the plate for generations to come? I mean, that's my shtick, right? Mm-hmm. And you know that. So as long as I can that comes out in this, then I'll be really happy with it. So that's the idea. Yeah.
And the book too, I saw again on your Instagram account, there was sort of a mock cover that I saw, which is beautiful. So you've got a book coming, and that's an independent situation from this television piece?
It is, yeah. So the book is due to come out in October. Wow. And it's crunch time because we're in, right. Yeah. So there's a ton left to do. But it is, call it a cookbook, I suppose, for lack of a better word, but it's a book. It has recipes in it. But it's filled with pictures of both, Marcia Tulk and I are writing it, and she is an amazing photographer. So all the photography is hers. She also has a beautiful collection of her grandfather's old photos, and he was quite a photographer. So she has all the negatives, and she's been scanning them and creating, and she's an artist too. So she's creating line drawings from these photographs that are sort of being blended together to create the introduction pages of the table of content. Anyway, they're gorgeous, and it's very exciting because it's my thing, right? It's that story. How do we put forth the stories of old and new, and make it not just about nostalgia, but about how the stories of then are continuing to grow us into the future. Kind of like how do we how do we do that, right? So this is what we're trying to do in this book. It's highly ambitious, I think. But you know what? You shoot for the stars, land somewhere in between.
Dude, I'm excited for you. I mean,
Thank you.
we haven't spoken in a while, and as your friend, just it's like, wow, you're about to get pushed into the national limelight there with a book and a TV show at the same time. I mean, it's going to get a lot of attention, even if it's small scale. It's going to get a lot of more attention probably than you're used to. So
I know
your life's about to change in some ways. You know,
it's always funny because when I do these things, I never put that much enough. I don't know. I would say if enough, don't put much weight to it, but it's like, oh, this is like something else I'm doing right now. And then, and then it happens and I'm like, oh shit, right. I didn't plan for that. Yeah. So, which is, and you got to embrace it. Right. And so I'm trying to embrace things with a little bit more weight because they are so important to me. Right. Yeah. The stories that are told, how they're told, how this place gets put out to the world is really important to me, which is why I specifically stuck with a local publisher, Boulder Publishing. And that was about me wanting to make sure that the stories were told how I wanted them to be told, and not the emphasis being just about selling books globally. Mm-hmm. And I know that might sound not great idea in terms of the bank account, but for me, it's definitely more important that these stories get told right, and that things that I want in there that are important to me don't get cut out. Like, these are other people's stories. I mean, these are not all my stories. Like, these are. I spent years going around and recording people on my iPhone, listening to the stories of tur hunting in Fogo Island, and you got like binders full of stories too, don't you? I have binders of stories, right, of these places, and when that lady Gloria McHugh down in Placentia, when her husband passed and she had heard that I was collecting these stories. I mean, this woman gave me binders of her husband's hundreds of recipes and stories that he had written down, right? And it's like, I feel a weight, like a responsibility that stuff gets told, in that voice of that person. Like, how do we do that? How do we make sure that the voice that's being put out there is that voice, right? And that's the stuff that's really important to me. So, and the book is carrying a bit of weight with it that I'm putting on myself.
Yeah, man, that thing you just said a minute ago, it's a really interesting moment because, like, I'm getting really tired of the socialism conversation. That it's like, I had a good friend come to me the other day and be like, I heard a really good case for socialism the other day, and I was like, dude, stop! Like, I don't even want to hear about it, because it's always like, well, it wasn't done right in these, because I'll be like, I'll list off all these places where it's been done, and it turns into true hell for people, and people flee those countries and come to countries like ours. And then of course he said, well, but they were explaining it wasn't done right before. And it's like, yeah, they always say that. But then this capitalism we have here, where you, like what you just said, there's the idea that these are the only two options, where you just said about like choosing between the integrity of your story and your bank account, like, that sucks that's how that works, that
maybe it's not the case, right? Don't get me wrong.
Well, and it might not be as things continue to evolve. I mean, it's kind of interesting how the things that you and I are interested in a couple of years ago, trying to get any attention, was 100% grassroots. And now neither you or I had to go dress this thing up and go pitch it all around. Like, they came to us.
They came to us. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Really? Yeah. What a turnaround,
What a turnaround. Yeah. And it's like, I'm unwilling and uninterested in it has to be who I am and what this place is. Like, it has to stick to the integrity of the people of here. Mm-hmm. Like, I could never move forward on anything, whether it's a TV show or book or any of that stuff, unless I felt that it was true to what is in my soul, right? Because that just ain't word it, man. That shit comes back on you.
Especially where you are and everything. I don't feel as much of that. Like I feel, well, like I said, Mainers are always going to look at me like I'm from New Hampshire. So I don't have, like, when I don't feel quite as much pressure. I don't feel like I speak on behalf of anyone, but I really see how you do, in a way, like how you're representing a place and a lot of old stories and a lot of lineage there.
It's a weight that I put on myself.
Fairly, though.
You can let other people influence you or not as much as you want, I guess. But, when these stories are close to people's hearts, like, you can't, and I don't know about everywhere else, but I know here, like, your family and the people who are close to you, the stories of these people, how it all came to be. Like, man, if that don't sit close on your heart, then I don't know. You gotta take a long walk in the woods, Daniel.
So if people are listening and they're like, "What does she mean? She keeps saying these stories and stories and stories." What do you tell people what you mean, just so they understand?
Yeah, so I mean, people are sharing with you things like, I don't know. I guess it's hard to put into words, I suppose. And I'm not really great with words. So when I think about, they're sharing something that is so intimate and so personal, I'm sure that you can relate, and many people probably listening can relate to the gravity of your first hunt, right? The gravity of when your grandfather and I, and I can speak to this now. I came to hunting later in life, like you. So when someone sits down across from me and they've got the photo albums out, man, they're showing me the pictures of their kid's first grouse hunt, their kid's first rabbit, his first moose hunt, and the pride that dad, and this is specifically a family in Fogo, that dad took to instill that in his kids. I mean, holy shit, if that don't come with weight, I mean, I can't change that story to make a good TV show. Like, that's his life. Like, that's his pride. That's where he put his pride on passing that stuff on to his kids, right? I mean, that's your soul, man. That's like the place that you came from, right? Like, and so those are the things, right? And they're showing you pictures of, people who have passed and what they learned from them. And like Larry took us out fishing, right?
Yeah.
And, and I remember you guys, you and Grant were up in the front of the boat when you were here. We were out cod fishing, and Larry was like, we were hitting the waves, right? Larry looks back at me and goes, I'm going to get these boys some fish, right? I got to get them out to the good grounds, right? And I mean, like, oh my God, did he not take that serious, right? And so that man...
In the gnarliest conditions that I've never been in a skiff on waves like that. No,
and he was loving it.
I remember I'm looking off the bow and Grant's looking back at the stern. So he can't see what's coming and he's holding the camera, and I'd be like, Grant, brace yourself. I remember he's holding onto a rope. But that boat, and he got us out there right on fish. I mean, that was pretty amazing.
Oh, I can't wait to see that episode. I can't wait to see that footage when it comes out. But I mean, that was like serious business for Larry, right? I mean, he wanted to take you to the place, and he was also getting a charge out of it too, right? Knowing that you guys were like not out on conditions like this. And that's like a joke to him, right? Like that he don't take nothing of that, right? But loving that he can... Yeah. Like the pride, right? You know what I mean? It's like that pride that he gets to take you guys out from Maine and bring you, and he's going to line up that cliff with that cliff and that lull in the land, and he's going to put you right on it, right? And that pride, like, I guess it's part of what carries the weight of telling the stories of here, And, we're not a very old place, right? So we live very close to our several generations in families here in Newfoundland. I mean, you can't get away with nutting here, which is good and bad, Daniel, right? you can't disappear in a place like this unless you come from somewhere else. Right. So we're always been really close to those things that are passed down, and so it's it's a pretty, it's a magic place, man, right?
One of the things that stood out to me there is what you just said. I mean, I'm used to places where, I mean, there's so much globalization now that anywhere you go, people are kind of from everywhere, and there's not as many. Where I live now, I know people who are locals here who know all the other locals, and they have for generations. But there's so much gentrification here that there's so many people who are kind of anonymous here too.
Right.
There, you guys all talk about your mom and dad like it's everybody's mom and dad. You guys will say stuff. You'll be like, well, dad said this, like as if it's my dad too, it's like, it's a really interesting way of communicating, but you feel the amount of culture in place and familial stuff there in a really visceral way.
Well, it's interesting because I would not even notice that. Right. But you coming in here would notice that.
Right? No one talks to me like that anywhere else.
Oh God. Good times.
It's really, really interesting. I have, the seal thing I learned about when I was out there, and just that has come up so many times. I don't know if you got to hear, I did a podcast with a great white shark biologist. I feel silly when I say great white now, because I know they're just called white sharks, and I feel like it's a silly added adjective, but people know it. People know what you're saying. I feel like if I just say white shark, people aren't going to take it as seriously. So great white shark.
Right.
We lost somebody here last summer to white shark attack, the first time in Maine's history. And, obviously that brings a lot of attention to the seal populations. Mm-hmm. And we have so many seals here now, and the waters are getting a bit warmer. So sharks are spending more time up here. And we knew they were down in the Cape Cod area, which is the southern part of the Gulf of Maine. But, just now we're aware, there's a lot more sharks up here right now. And with all the seals in the water and all the people in the water, people are there's like a shifting perspective. And the one thing nobody will talk about is the seals. Like, why there's so many seals. Right, and, and this idea of a sustainable seal hunt has this thing that I took back from being up there. That's so fascinating to me now. Do you follow anything on Netflix?
I'm not really good, but what is it? What do you watch?
Smart if you don't. I watched a film recently. It was so irritating to me, called Seaspiracy.
Wait, you forced yourself to watch it?
Yeah, I did, man. I watched it on the exercise bike. I was so mad.
Right.
Anyway, it's kind of it's like your typical kind of vegan activist-y kind of dude. And I think he wanted to do something on whales, but it kind of morphs, and before you know it, it's a really critical look at the world of commercial fishing. And it's at some level really deserved, because the practices happening in some parts of the world are pretty shocking. Things that Canada and the United States would not participate in today, but are still happening internationally. But unfortunately, the way it's done is that it conflates as if all fishing is this way, and but there was this scene where he goes to Japan. They harvest a few dozen dolphins a year in that cove. And they talk about it as if these few dozen dolphins are going to massively impact the world's dolphin population. Or it's
is this the one where it's just the net and all the blood, and it's this whole?
There's that one. There's one called The Cove that's about that specific thing, but he kind of covers it too. But anyway, I just seeing how, with the right music, the portrayal with the right music and the right voiceover, and how it just looks. I understand to the outsider how shocking it looks. And I remember when I was there, I was like, what would it take for me to go on one of these seal hunts? And you were like, man, I mean, you have to go to that special program first, just for the Canadian government to allow you to even see it, because they're so worried about the bad press.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm down here going man, we need one of these seal hunts down here.
Yeah, we could just eat them.
Yeah, just a sustainable amount. I had my buddy Arthur. The other day we sat down for a podcast, and actually this came up with another guide in Maine recently too. The main guide put it like this. He said, people think if you didn't kill an animal, it would just live forever. And I'm I noticed that. And then my buddy Arthur was saying, we were talking about the difference between additive and compensatory mortality. So additive is you're killing more animals than are being replaced, but compensatory mortality is where those few dozen dolphins don't have any impact on the population because of all the babies that they have massively outnumber them. And And you can do that with seals,
Yeah.
I just think that I saw a post that you had. Now, who's this girl that you had up there who's the hunter? She seems like she's got a huge following on social media, and there was a picture of
Yeah.
her with like a seal flipper dish.
Yeah. So that's Jen Shears.
Okay.
She's an avid hunter, travels the world hunting.
Canadian?
Canadian from Newfoundland. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's
from there.
awesome. She has a seal store here where it's a boutique, and the store, of course, there's constantly shenanigans out in front.
She's got one of so that's in St. John's?
Yes, she does.
And it's a
yeah.
place that sells like seal fur boots.
Clothes and fur and boots and the works of it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I went to a couple shops like that downtown when I was there.
Well, there's only two, so you probably came across her place, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, so she asked if they did they were expecting a protest this day, and as part of, I believe it was part of National Seal Products Day. Now so I gave her a recipe that she handed out to people that came in the store that day, and it was Mom's seal flipper pie recipe, right?
Cool. Okay.
And so she made it and put it up. Yeah, yeah.
And when you say seal flipper, you mean more like kind of the shoulder, right? You don't mean the actual flipper, like the hand.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So you call that flipper. Yeah. I'm just so moved by that whole story, and I'm frustrated by when I went into those shops, I was seeing boots that I was like, I would love to bring these mucklucks home for Avani, but I
know,
cannot. Like, you can't bring them into the States. I could buy them there, and then I have to leave them in Canada, and where it's a lawful hunt, overseen by biologists,
shocking,
totally
isn't it?
sustainable, and that there's this law that prevents the importation of finished goods is weird to me, because it's kind of like, how there's exceptions with like First Nations stuff, like things you can't possess unless they are a handicraft.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you'd think like there would be a thing where it's like, well, it's a finished boot that came through the legal seal fur industry, so you can import that, just not maybe raw skins or something. I would understand that, but it's such a bummer, because
it's fascinating, right? Like her store, the National Boutique downtown. I mean, yeah, it is. It's terrible that you guys can't come and buy these products that come from a legal hunt that is like the most highly regulated hunt, likely globally, and bring this stuff back. It's right. It's all the stuff. It's the media. It's the Netflix shows. It's the, anyway, that's just a whole, But anyway, she runs a thriving business. She is a fantastic human. She is such a great face and person to be. I mean, if you hear her speak on any interviews and that she's done, I mean, she is calm and educated, and she's a fantastic voice for.
But gets after it, huh? I mean, you go to her Instagram page, you're like, oh, she's all over the place hunting.
Oh yeah,
fishing, everything. I mean, it's a really cool, inspiring thing to see. How'd you guys come to work together?
Well, we don't do a lot of work together. We support each other in all kinds of endeavors. And I put off a program a couple of years ago called Girls with Guns, which was a instructional program here at the Rod and Gun Club. And and she's always up for that stuff. Like, she's like, let me know any way I can help. So, to ask her to come out and be a part of something, I mean, that's what she does, right? And she fully embraces it. And she is, she's such a great voice for women who hunt, that the seal industry. So she's wicked. She's wicked.
It's so cool. I really wish there was some way I could, like through food, be educating on some of this marine mammal stuff, but it's just so prohibited here that there's no way I can legally participate in anything like that. Yeah, it's just frustrating, because there was a whaling story in that film as well that was just depicted in a way where, even though they explained like it's a completely sustainable thing, they depicted it in such an awful way. There was a scene where the water is quite red with blood at the shore because they've just brought in, I think they weren't minkies. I don't remember what the whales were, if they were,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, small whales. And they brought in a few. They do this annually, and so there's a lot of blood in the water, and there's a dad there holding his son, and it's like a beautiful scene, but they depict it as this evil thing, and I know what that dad's feeling holding that son, looking at this harvest, and yet they try to depict it as so awful. It just frustrates me. I wish I could do more in that regard. So I hope one day I can make a show up there with you guys about it, because I would love to throw my hat into that arena a little bit.
What I think, how I address it is by doing what I do, right? Because I can't make any change in that. I can't. I don't have the power to, or you and I, well, you're doing it. You're already doing it. Like what you have out there with your TV show now. I mean, all we can do is kind of tell our side of the story, right? That's all we can do. We have, the education that I do with youth groups, the education I do with travelers that come here, with local people that come here. You have to stick to the positiveness. You have to continue to put out there what you believe, and that the rest of it's noise, right? And it's important to those people, obviously, but I don't have time to chase that shit. Like I'm
exactly.
doing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have it in me, Daniel.
Oh no, I totally get it.
Right. So
yeah. And doing the work with people at an individual level is, I think it's just so important. I see it all the time, because where my wife works with individual children and I work more with media in a more broad sense, we both have impact, but the impact that you have on a one-on-one level when you're working with people or you're feeding people, man, it's powerful. Like
it's beautiful.
Watching when some of her students, come to the house, and I took some of them around for maple syrup stuff this year, just taking them from tree to tree and gathering the buckets, carrying the sap, boiling it down, giving them a bottle of maple syrup at the end of it. And I know that's going to stick much longer and more powerfully, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So, what is it I saw you've got also doing some courses now? You got like coursework I saw on your website. Yeah.
So we're doing, this is part of, again, right, talking about Newfoundlanders, right? We dies for bringing all hands together. And when we can't, so now that we all can't get together and travel freely, so I did some courses kind of bringing together families from across the globe, which was really fun. And so I do a lot of private family bookings or private friend bookings where people will all come together. Last time we had people from Ontario and some from the States, and they had family members in Australia, and we all figured the time zones out, and everyone signed on, and we made some traditional Newfoundland food. So right now we're doing another one. We're doing a fish cake one. I'm doing some of my Nan's traditional tea buns, and then I'm throwing
So you have like you're filming yourself in the kitchen, and everybody's kind of following along like a cooking workshop.
Wow. Yep. So people either book them privately for their family, or I put some up in it, and then they're just up for sale. And and then we're doing some wild game sausages too. Okay. So it's all the stuff that I still do. It's just different. It's all done on Zoom now, and the classes are small, so I still get to tell lots of stories and listen to other people's stories. And I'm surprised at how intimate and special you could make that time. You're seeing grandchildren and grandparents sign in from, thousands of miles away, and they haven't seen each other in a year, right? And you get the follow-up emails later that just tells you, shares you how important it was to their family that you brought everyone together like that. I mean, the last group, they had like monogram chef hats and aprons made, and they took them all out. I mean, they were a riot. And this was like a Friday night, after it was all over, I left my Zoom open out in the workshop, and they were there like 2 hours later still having a beer and chatting her
hanging out.
Hanging out. It was great.
I would have been wrong about this if you'd asked me a year and a half ago about, did I think you could have like an intimate encounter with people on Zoom. I mean, I'd just been like, I was very used to it from a business perspective. I'd been, and as an interviewer, I'd use these programs for ages, but I remember I remember when the first friends of mine would be like, "You want to have a Zoom hangout?" And I'd be like, "What are you
What?
kidding me? Like that sounds so no, that sounds so stupid." And then you do it and you're like, "Wow, that actually felt like we hung out." It's
Right.
fairly satisfying,
It is. And it's like all those endorphins and hormones that your brain releases when you laugh
Yeah, right,
with
right,
friends,
right.
and you're still able to get on with your foolishness and your banter, and it was just so sweet. I mean, I just watched this family as if I wasn't even there, right? Yes, we cooked together, but like they just carried on and making fun of each other and razzing each other, and half of them are from Newfoundland. So the full razz was on, right? It was
so,
such a good time.
so I
It's
didn't
like
plan. I wasn't planning this pitch, but like people can reach out to you who hear this and they can hire you to do that.
absolutely, yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool, man.
It is
That's really
fun.
cool.
It's really fun. I have all of a sudden you feel like it's like a privilege. All of a sudden you have this inside scoop into people's lives and into their family and their shenanigans, which is pretty special, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you have the 2-year-old eating fish cakes across the globe with his grandfather and in Ontario or whatever. So it's pretty sweet.
What are you making fish cakes out of up there? You seem like you have such good
Oh
quality
cod,
fish. I think a fish
only
cake is like
cod.
that's for the listeners. If you say fish in Newfoundland, that
Right?
means cod, which is strange to me, but understandable given the history. But to me, fish cakes is this thing we do when we have like a kind of a low quality fish meat. Or a bony fish, it's cod is like down here is considered so damn good. You wouldn't make fish cakes out of it. But what parts of the fish are you using?
So this is usually the fillets that are salted, right? So it's salt fish cakes.
Ah, okay,
Um,
salt cod.
yeah, yeah, it's all cod, and they're a like staple in like a traditional staple. Like fish cakes is a prized way to enjoy saltfish.
It's
Yeah, so it's
for people who aren't aware of the history. It's amazing, by the way. You must experience this with your own children, where it's trying to get kids or even young. I say kids, because now I'm finding myself calling like people in their 20s kids now.
you're all getting old when.
It's funny because my hair's still dark. I don't have like a lot of I don't I don't have a lot of grays yet. But I am having this experience where I'll be with people and I'll realize I'm the oldest person there. It's happening a lot
I
where it's like,
know.
oh man, I don't feel yet like I'm that person, but I am now.
Or that, and I hear you. It's happening.
But
Yeah, without
and
the gray hair too. But it's all of a sudden I'm signing into these online workshops and stuff, and or like become like being hired by these professionals to. I mean, even this TV show, and I sign on, and I'm like, the executive producer looks 20 to me, and I'm
yeah,
going,
right.
like, how did you get that job at 20?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the sign of the times, Daniel.
Yeah, well, the thing is like they don't remember a time before the internet, and they don't remember a
Right?
time. They don't. I mean, to me, like our phones are
Totally,
still this weird beyond Star Trek technology. I mean,
totally.
you go back to our childhood and you watch any of the sci-fi, and no one had even thought of an internet or cell phones in
Right.
sci. They didn't even have that in science fiction. So folks don't remember it. So the idea of like salt cod, because people don't remember that there wasn't refrigeration like very recently in history, but cod had to be preserved with really heavy salting, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
so in mom's
it's
time
inedible like that, right?
there was no refrigeration. And mom's only 73. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
there was no refrigeration. She carried wood to school to heat the school. I mean, it was
Wow, really?
I know.
She,
Yeah, I know. And every time I say that, it's like, wait, okay, that doesn't sound normal to everyone I say that to.
yeah,
Um,
it doesn't.
right? But that was normal. That was Outport, that was Outport, Newfoundland, and so yeah, there was only small game that you could get fresh throughout the winter, rabbits and birds and that kind of stuff. But all the fish all summer was then salted and it was stored. And Mom talks about all the salt fish stored up out in the old shed, right? And that was the only fish then they got during the winter. And again, right, you're in an island in the North Atlantic where pretty much nothing grows for 8 months of the year. So, I
It's
mean,
rugged terrain there, that's for sure.
she's gorgeous. Look in all her glory.
Yeah. You can the rock, right? It was something I heard
Right.
people calling it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they don't call us the rock for nothing. There's no agriculture here, per se. We all had our like mom and them and had their own family gardens and stuff, and all the vegetables were root cellared, and because access was a big deal, right? The roads. I mean, Mom says the roads weren't paved to go into Pooch Cove. I mean, it takes me 30 minutes to get to Pooch Cove now, but in Mom's time, I mean, it took hours. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Describe to me that if you had this, so like a salt cod fillet,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks, I almost like for people trying to imagine it, if you picture like a fillet sized piece of crystallized ginger, it almost has that look where it's, you know what I mean? It's like white through with salt, right? And crystallized salt. So how do you render that into something edible? Because I've never worked with it. I've only worked with fresh cod.
Right. Well, anyone who's been to Iceland or even, to Spain, bacalao, I mean, to dry salt to that level is pretty common in those places. So the fresh cod, would be heavily salted for days, and then it would be air dried, just like they do in the Faroe Islands, just like they do in Iceland. And it's dried, absolutely rock hard. And then it's stored. It's stored indefinitely then if necessary, but it was then taken out. Like, it is really hard to find beautiful, properly well salted cod now. Lots of times cod is just corn, so it's not salted and air dried like it was years ago. And when people corn it, it's usually just corn for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's frozen. But
that makes like a product that people kind of can use in a similar way or something.
Yeah, you can use it very quickly. Like corn cod, you take it out of the freezer, you bring it to a boil and turn the pan off, right? Okay. And then you can use it. Salted cod, like hard salted cod, is it is soaked overnight, and then the next day you bring it to a boil and you change the water, and sometimes you boil it again.
And that's just to draw salt out of it.
That's right. Yep. And then it just becomes, pliable again and edible and delectable.
And the flesh holds together, because I imagine it like does. If I boiled cod, it would just come to pieces where, it flakes so quick. Like cod on a pan. Yeah, fresh cod on a pan. Just keeping the fillet together so it doesn't separate into flakes can be a thing,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I imagine hitting it with boiling water. It's like, how is it holding together? But it must change it a lot.
It does change it a lot. And that's why fish cakes are just a fantastic way to eat it, right? I mean, the saltfish was often eaten with potatoes, and sometimes it was just on the side with potatoes. But, you're talking about a time when, we weren't worried now about what the texture of the fish was, Daniel, right? Not like you and I today, delicately caring for these fish that we buy. And oh my God, I mean, they're like hand petted or something, right? So,
I just got off my heated gold toilet a minute ago.
Right, that's right. Yeah,
walk here on my heated floors. So.
Oh my God, we've become these pompous assholes sometimes, haven't we?
I'm wearing a smoking jacket right now.
Right? Yeah, that's right. Your crested smoking jacket. Right?
Pure comfort. Oh, just so genteel.
Right.
No, it's really true. I mean, we have gotten and that sort of end of the empire thing where food, culinary technique and chefs become such a significant part of the culture. So now we're all really exposed to high-end cuisine. And so we have gotten a taste for the finest of things, finer than, the kings and queens of old had access to, right? So it does make some of these old food styles seem so bizarre to people who aren't exposed to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, half the stuff I'll cook today, Dad won't go near it, right? I mean, he's like, I'm not eating that. Like, everything has to be separate for Dad, right? I mean, try
the foam, Dad. It tastes of asparagus.
Right? Try the asparagus foam, Dad. Right, but I mean, Dad will come for supper, and all his food has to be separate. It's like the white potato with the white fish, and like not, vegetables are hardly in his diet at all. But my mom loves all kinds of fun stuff. Cool. She'll try anything I make. But it's interesting, I do find it fascinating that, and this holds true for cultures everywhere that have their what was once poverty food has now reached such incredible heights we can hardly afford it, for God's sake.
Right.
Yeah. Like ptarmigan. I mean, all right. I mean, Mom and them grew up on grouse and ptarmigan and all that stuff. And now, I mean, I can go down to one of the, San Pellegrino's best restaurants in the world, 5 minutes from here, and pay, I don't know, $48, $56 for this spectacular plate of food. And it's ptarmigan, right? And, we just did a video today. Like, we wrapped ptarmigan and bacon, and I put like a wild spice rub on it, and Vanessa did it for the Facebook video. And I mean, I'm looking at it going, oh my God, my father wouldn't touch that unless it was in the oven, like cooked for 4 hours with a gravy on it, right? It's so funny.
Right. Try it rare, Dad.
Oh my God. What's wrong with that? Sure, that's not cooked, right? Anyways,
yeah, we went down to Georgia recently on a hog hunt, and
did you?
Yeah, and came back. Well, one of the things that happened was my friend kept pushing us, saying, "Get down here." I think it was January, and he kept saying, "Man, they're going to burn through all their acorn fat, and they're going to be lean. So get down here now." And because they, been feeding all season, and we got some that were so fat that we were able to make bacon. And that's the thing people say is kind of hard to do with wild hogs, but we were able to do it. And I'm down to these like last couple bags of it. Oh. But like when you have like bacon that you made yourself from hogs you got to hunt, not buy, or not raise, or it's like, wow, this is so cool, like a wild game bacon.
Oh my God, it's golden.
It's so good too. I mean, my goodness, but I'm running low now, but I'm starting to wonder. Oh, and you mentioned to me just before we started recording that you might bear hunt this year. I'm starting to wonder if I could make a reasonably good bacon out of bear, because the fat there's so much of that fat that mixed with meat, I think it could happen.
Here's my question to you. So yes, I'm very excited about the bear hunt because all of our game is so lean, right? So, that I have no wild fat to add to my larder, right?
And the fat you have, like you do have like eiders and stuff like that, but the fat is so fishy and not appetizing. No. You wouldn't exactly want to render that.
Yeah. Now don't tell Dad that, because that'd be like, that's
a good fat.
Underdog fat, right? Yep. So, right. Even though it tastes like mussels, right? But yeah, so I'm really excited about this beer because it will be my only source of wild fat. Like right now I'll render out lamb because I got a couple of, really great farmers who give me lamb and pork. But you know what I get like that? I'm like, no, man, I know it's pork, and it's like, I need a wild game fat source, right? And so I'm super excited about a bear hunt because, and really just being introduced to it from you, because like I've never heard anyone here ever render out bear fat like that, right? So I am like envisioning, they say if you envision it, things can happen.
Yeah.
So I'm like envisioning mason
and it does.
jars. Right. I'm envisioning mason jars of beer fat in my life, because all I keep thinking about is, and again, I have this jar of lamb fat in the fridge, and I like scoop that out and I cook like moose tenderloin and stuff in it. Like, oh my God, delicious. But yeah, I'm really dying for beer fat. So I get a chance to get a spring and then apply for a fall beer too. So if I were to choose one, should I go for the fall beer because of the fat, right? Yes.
Because when you get a really lean bear, it's still great meat. I love the flavor of lean bear meat, but the fat's kind of the whole thing. They're our wild hog, essentially, right? They're like our wild lard source. So
yeah, I know. I wish we had wild hog here, but don't tell anyone I said that.
No, we don't have them up here in Maine either. So I mean, having the bear is, I was talking to my wife though last night about it, and I was saying the two styles of bear hunting that are most common here, because most people just don't have the skill set to hunt a bear on the ground like a track a bear or something like that.
Okay.
I mean, you meet some people who can do it, but that's nothing I've ever learned how to do. And I think that's a pretty advanced skill set. So we bait them and we hunt them with hounds. And I was saying, of all of them, like hunting with hounds is really intense because if you look at a bear and you think about it anthropomorphically, you think of it sort of as very similar to yourself in a lot of ways. It's kind of like feels like a murder. I hate to put it that bluntly. Well, you've got them up a tree and then you're there you are looking each other in the eye for a while. You call the shooter up, you take your time to get a good shot, you pull the dogs back. It's not like a lot of other things. It's really different.
Well, I've seen it on your show. Now we're not allowed to hunt with hounds here, and we're not allowed to use hounds on moose or any game here. The only thing we're allowed to use hunting dogs on is upland birds and rabbits. Speaking of that, I have a new pup, and I have my first hunting dog. I do, and she's she's an Irish red and white, so she's like the original Irish setter.
Cool. That's going to be an upland game dog.
Yeah, so I'm
right on. She's going to point.
Like, well, yeah, she should point and she should retrieve, and so cool. So it's very exciting. That's my new 4-year plan now to train her and really well, but beer here we can't use hounds, but
she'll be baiting though.
We will bait, yeah. So the guide will bait. I'll use a guide because I don't know anything about bear hunting. Will be my first one, and that will just bring me more comfort. And like you, I'm super concerned about making sure that I get a good shot. And I mean, I can't even imagine the adrenaline rush that will be when that moment happens. And so
they're just so awesome. When they come in, they're just different than with an ungulate. You just look at it, you think like that's food, but a bear, you're like, man, this thing is like. Can stand up on 2 legs like me.
I know.
It looks me in the eye, aware of me, It
scares me shitless, actually, the idea of shooting a bear, but hopefully I can do it for all the reasons.
Oh, you can do it. You can do it. And when you're on the other side of it, you're in this interesting club. Like it's kind of neat when you talk to other people. I don't know. There's something people who do it just get with each other. But I had a guy on my show recently to do a thing about black bear attacks, which are, just far more common than I knew, and read his book about it.
Really?
And he's a bear hunter. Yeah, it's pretty wild story actually. But anyway, he was telling me one of the things that he does when he's got a guide who set up a bait site for him is he'll send a T-shirt with his BO to the guide and have them put that up in the tree stand. So and that way the bear becomes accustomed to your scent. Yeah, because he said what'll happen is, and I've talked to a couple other guides since who do a similar thing, and they said that the first couple days as the bear comes in, it's smelling that, so it won't go to the bait. It'll watch that, but eventually it realizes, okay, that's not really a person. Might go up and inspect it, and then it gets confident, and then it starts to come to the bait site with the smell, so that when you're there, if it does wind you, it's used to that smell. So might be something to consider as you want to you want a sure thing, obviously, as much as possible when you go. So yeah, they're smart. So, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't mean when I said before, like it just has this. You're looking into the eyes of something very intelligent. When I talk to people who've been on whale hunts, they've told me the same thing. It's like you're looking into a deep sentience that you can recognize that you just don't see in the eyes of a lot of prey animals. And that's what I feel will be the that will be the one that will pull at the mental state, right? Mm-hmm. At the moment. So. Anyway, so I really look forward to it. Apparently, if I go to a place where they're kind of living on the salmon rivers, that the fat will be fishy. But if I've heard it, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if that's true. I'm skeptical. I don't know either. But I've heard people I've heard Ranella say that, and I don't think him to be somebody who repeats tales the way a lot of people will, but so you want to get an inland bear, I imagine. Well, I hope, so out around like Terra Nova National Park, there's bears out there. That's like 3.5 hours outside the city, and then from so a central bear would then, so I'm told, would be those main diet would be berries and stuff that time of year. So I don't know. I'm pretty stoked. I'm, nervous as heck and hope it all works out, because what I really want is like mason jars of beer fat. Yeah. Yeah. I would give you a couple of other pieces of input that stand out to me about it. When you first see a bear come into a bait site, and you haven't hunted them before, they all, have you ever been anywhere where you're like in a lodge or something? There'll be a taxidermy of like a bear cub or like really small bears. And you're like, who shot that? Right. The first bear that comes in looks so huge to you, even if it's not, especially at the distance. And people will just shoot the very first bear that comes in. And it takes a lot of discipline to sit through a bear at the bait site and wait for it to leave. Or sometimes it gets dark and you just got to come down off the stand, and it's still there. But so the learning how to size a bear, because obviously if the bear is small, he's not going to be as fat. So
Right.
the thing that I'm looking for over time, I've kind of started to figure out are the telltales for me is how low is the belly hanging, and
Okay.
can I see through underneath the bear? Because if I can, then it's not a very big bear. He's still lean. Like if I can see like trees underneath him or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing I'm looking at are the ears. So if the ears are big like a dog's ears, the bear is not very large. Like when a bear is
Oh,
real big, like if you're looking for like a huge bear, you'll start to notice they barely have ears, like these just little tufts, because their head has gotten so big, the ears have basically
right.
disappeared into it. So
Oh,
I don't care if it's a huge bear. That's not what I'm looking for, is the
hmm.
biggest, hugest bear, but a good medium-sized fat bear is going to have a belly that hangs almost to the ground, and ears are not going to look super goofy and big. So those two things
Right.
will help a lot, because, last year, I think it was last year was the first year I saw a bear come to my stand and I didn't shoot it. Where I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
I'm going to wait. I've never done that. I'd always take the first bear, and I got some bears that were lean and some bears that were fat. But last year I waited and I ended up getting a real fat bear, which was
Well,
nice.
that's kind
So
of nice though. I mean, that's like, that's honing your craft, right?
that's
That's
it. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
experience, that's time, that's thoughtful hunting to me. I appreciate that. That's cool.
Well, and it's just that thing though, like too, if you get a bear that's lean, then you missed out on the fat thing. You'll probably connect in too with, because another thing I've noticed is hunters don't seem to care if you want to take their bear fat. So you might be able
Right?
to connect in through that guide to some other folks' fat stashes too. Because
Yeah, I don't know anyone who ever would ever think of the idea of, I mean, even like if I had bought well, even when I got lambs this year, and I butchered them out and I talked to the farmer and I was like, man, those lambs were fatty. It was awesome. And he was like, oh, no, really? I'm like,
so I'm
no,
so
no,
sorry. I should have trimmed it
right?
away.
Right. And I'm like, no, that's a really good thing. And I get them whole, of course, the butcher myself. So I'm looking at all this lamb fat. And like,
Yeah.
I'd never heard of anyone render out lamb fat because so it's and I don't get lambs. I get like mutton. I want it to be at least like a year and a half old, so they grow them out bigger for me. So because if not, I'm looking at chops that have like a quarter, like the size,
Yeah.
little tiny. So
Right.
and I like the taste of lamb. My kids are familiar with it, like. So I want a bigger lamb, but then animals. So then what comes with that is more fat, which I'm absolutely stoked about.
Yeah, I've had that too. Years ago, I used to buy mutton from one of the islands here, and these animals get real fat on like seaweed and stuff like that. And I always
Right?
thought that
Yeah.
was really awesome. But you'd get it to the butcher, and then you'd ask, "Please leave the fat," and they
You
wouldn't
had to.
most of the time. Yeah, it was really hard to get it. Um,
I
yeah,
bought a
but
side of beef one time, and I went to the butcher, and I said to the butcher, when I went to pick it up, and he was like, "Oh, you're not going to be happy about this." He's like, "I just hauled like 100 pounds of beef fat off that," and I'm like, oh, "That's great. Where is it?"
ah,
He's like, "What do you mean? Where is it?" I'm like, "I chucked it." I'm like, "What?"
oh,
So
it's
yeah, but you
crazy,
know what?
right?
But it's that change in mentality. It's
Yep.
that it's people like you and I who are now going, hang on, we actually can utilize this stuff. And so it's that education piece, right?
I was talking to a guy yesterday, no, 2 days ago, about bear fat and bear hunter, and we're just getting chat about it. And I was saying, to be honest, and I just kind of made fun of the eiders there, because I do notice the sea duck fat isn't like exactly called to me, but
Right.
most of the animals I've rendered, and I was saying I've rendered turkey fat before, where I've had these turkeys that have all this clumps of yellow fat in them, and the fat has been awesome to cook with, like really
Oh,
good for Asian style dishes, that poultry
mm,
fat. And then I was telling a story of a squirrel that I had been feeding out in my backyard, and I just been putting black sunflower seed to him. And he ate so much of it. Eventually, I harvested him, and he was so fat. I was like, I'm going to render this. So I rendered out a gray squirrel, and it was the nicest, cleanest fat. And so anyway,
wow.
I just think we're at this interesting point in history where people just don't appreciate fat for what the way ancestrally. And one other thing Ranella is always talking about is that the early pioneers to this continent from Europe, that they depended on bear for food and deer more for skins, and that
Mm-hmm.
they saw the bear as the most important game animal because of all that fat. Because obviously,
Right.
if you're trying to survive out here, like log cabin style by yourself or in a very small family unit, you just needed that fat, not just for food, but you needed to waterproof things and burn for
Mm-hmm.
fuel and burn for candlelight and all these kind of things. Because, bear fat candles is evidently a thing too, So anyway, I, and from like the seal fat candles
Yeah,
up there and the horns of seal fat.
and the whale oil that like
Yeah,
lit the
yeah, lit the
lamp
world.
the
Yeah,
world. Yeah.
exactly.
So it is,
Yeah.
and it is, and this is, you're right. I think that this is the, that point at which where it's the telling a new story point, right? And we get to tell it, and now people are paying attention differently than they
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
than they used to. So that's the opportunities that we get to tell the world these new stories, and share with people what we now find value in, right? And these are values that are centuries old, and we're just reminding ourselves that that they have value almost in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does, because I've
yeah.
had people now from my show. It's only been running a few months, but people come and say, "Hey, I saw what you were doing with bear fat. I really want to learn to do
Mm,
that." Or, so that's what's cool is the stuff you're going to do for your show. It's going to
right.
create buzz around that, and then people. I know people often worry like, "Oh, I don't want to popularize that because it might be gone." It's like, actually, it's kind of that can happen, but it's also often the opposite. That once people value like when people stop valuing something, it's
Mm-hmm.
easy for it to go away. So
Mm,
getting people to start to see that, like that lamb fat as valuable again and that beef
mm-hmm.
fat as valuable again, like that's actually a good thing, I think,
I'm
to
with you.
associate value on it.
Yeah, I'm with you, because like everything, if it has value, then then we're going to pay attention to it. If it
Yep.
lands on our plate and someone tells me that they're going to take it away, all of a sudden has a whole lot more value than it did
Right.
before I ate
Right.
it. Right.
Man, Lori, I'm so excited for you. I'm going to be watching pretty close over these next few months to see how this rolls out. When's the book going to be out?
So finished the end of June and supposed to go to print in October.
Okay, let's get you
Yeah.
back on the show when it comes out. I
Cool.
do hope I get a signed copy, please.
Right.
And then when will the show start airing, do you think? I know it's probably too early to
The
say.
fall. No, it'll air the fall. Actually, I think it's going to start
Wow.
airing in September, October as well. So it's going to be a busy fall.
Will we be able to see it outside of Canada?
I'm not sure. But when it starts airing, we can catch up again in October.
We'll find some hack. I know with WildFed,
Right?
it was like we found this app you could get that would stream that to our
Like,
channel, and we had people doing that. So I'm sure we'll find some hack. But yeah, let's talk again when all this stuff's happening, because I'd love to
cool.
get people on it. And it's just great to see. Well, it's also cool to see like, oh, cool. It's not just happening to me, because we had this experience where it's like, how's this happening
Right.
with our show? And now it's like, oh man, this is great, because there's so much room, and there's all of us
So
who've been
much.
putting the work in, and there's like so many of these stories to be told. And I'm excited that the world cares right now. It's like, even if it's temporary, it's like, we got to take advantage of this moment and get the stories out there. So
Well said.
it's really cool, man. Well,
It's very
congratulations. Tell
exciting.
everybody, I know
You
you changed your
too.
Instagram handle. Thank you. Tell people like where they find you. What's all your stuff now, and how do they?
Yeah, so
how do
I'm
they-
still at Cod Sounds is the company for Instagram, and me personally, it's at Food Culture Place on Instagram, and Lori McCarthy on Facebook, and Cod Sounds on Facebook, and all that stuff. Yeah, so that's real. Find me, reach out. It's awesome to hear from people, isn't it? Like you say, we start doing a show and they're like, man, I want to do that with beer. I'm like, yes. I get pictures for people who are like making wild game sausages and making ptarmigan and they're hauling them at the freezer. I'm like, yes, this is what it's about. So
I also like it when people are like, hey, do you want to come out here and hunt elk with us? They're like, hey, do you want to,
exactly.
we want to take you on this thing. It's like, oh, now I'm like, okay, that's legit privilege right there. I'll take some of that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
pretty cool. Well, yeah, this is great. It's been so easy to talk to you. Please tell everybody up there I say hi. Looking forward to coming for a visit again when the world is, I don't know. I don't think it's going back to normal ever, but hopefully at some point travel's a thing again.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
I'd love to get up there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Find yourself back up here. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I think I will.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Yeah, it was wicked to catch up with you again, and endless things to talk about. So It's been fun as always.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.